You are an entrepreneur. And the next level of the game is unlocking the sales and marketing level. And that's what you need to be doing to get to $1 million.
Hey, podcast listener, even if you are alone in your entrepreneurial journey, know that today, right now in your earbuds, you are joined by thousands of entrepreneurs from all around the globe seeking to grow better, more profitable location-independent businesses. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and download our entire back catalog, check out tropicalmba.com.
Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, boss man. You've got a nice hue to you over there.
It's called a sunburn. Yeah. I'm still peeling the layers from Mexico. Yeah, we just got back from Mexico a little bit ago.
Yeah.
What a trip, man. What a trip.
What a country. What a people. What a trip.
Unbelievable, dude. How is it every time I go down there, I forget it's only 2.5 hours from Austin. You're a passport away.
It's a
from
domestic.
Going to a different country.
That's right.
It's crazy.
So we both got sunburns. That's good. We are going to go over in detail DC, Mexico by the numbers. So if you want to nerd out about that event, what we learned from it, some of the things we're doing on our event side, we're going to cover that at the end of today's episode and hear what Ian's experience was like down in Playa del Carmen. Sexy name. It's good branding.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. First at the top, if you are thinking about joining the DC Accelerator, you've got until the end of the week to do so. We've been on the phone all week with companies looking to grow to $1 million. A listener wrote me last week saying, hey, what's the price? It's like hidden on the, you guys talked about how good the price is. The price is $5,000 a year. That's how much it costs. For every year you're in, it's $5,000. It's a good price. I was joking, like, I'm not worried about the value prop. I'm worried about us getting out alive at the end of it. So
we're going to go into that today, actually, too. Big focus of the show is FP&A. So we're going to figure out if we screwed up or not.
FP&A, is that a soccer team? What?
Yeah, financial planning and analysis. Should use less acronyms, sorry. But that's kind of what the whole finance industry is about. That's why you have to hire professionals, is to decode the acronyms.
That's right.
So here I am. Doing the same thing.
We are going to dig into some finances. So anything you want to say about the DC Accelerator? We talked a little bit about it last week. I think the main thing is, from my perspective, we are getting more applications than we expected. And so it looks like we're going to have a very vibrant, let's go get it group here.
Yes. We're getting more than we thought. The other surprise for me is like how far along people are. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but I'm very impressed. Like the average amount of revenue, I would say is around $500,000 a year, actually.
So we've got something to work with.
Yeah. So that's very exciting. And most of these people have teams. Most of these people have decent product market fit. I can tell you a couple of different companies. They're in e-learning spaces, courses, productized services, a SaaS, one community, a couple of agencies, a broker. So diverse group of people. But yeah, I'm very impressed with how far along people are. And then also how aggressive they want to be about their growth in the next year or two.
Yeah.
That's super exciting. And that's one of the messages I think that maybe didn't come along super strong when we first started this. But it's the case with DC Black too. DC Black is not a cigar club. That is a community for 7 and 8 figure founders that are aggressively trying to scale or exit their business. And the same thing is popping up in the Accelerator. So that's very exciting for me to see and to talk to, because some of these problems that people are bringing up in these discovery calls, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to connect you. I can't wait to work on this problem. I can't wait till you meet these other people, because I think there's going to be so many breakthrough moments for them in the next year.
Yeah. I got an email the other day that was like, I thought the DC was a bunch of people trying to find the best beach to hang out on. And I'm like, well, we're ambitious about it. No, I think in general, like we were talking with the team this week, that's the direction. Like, look, at finding the beach is an easy problem, and that's cool. That's part of it, having fun. But I think in terms of our team, we're prioritizing for ambition and connections and making our work count. And that's been really fun to ask people to raise their hands and say, hey, who wants to go on this journey? Who wants to grow these $1 million businesses? Let's figure out how it gets done. I'm really excited for this.
The beach is always the backhanded compliment, and that's why we stick with it. It's also a code. It's a code to keep people out. So I think it's working.
All right. So the summary is this. The DC Accelerator kicks off June 1. Your last chance to apply is this week. So head on over to dynamitecircle.com and say what up. You know, one of the things that I think we really want to do with this is make public the data that we're learning from these companies and create resources out of it so that everyone can participate and learn from these case studies and just to see what's working. And I think it's going to be a really interesting time for the show itself because we're going to try to graft these stories onto the show and empower all the listeners who don't want to join DC Accelerator now to get that value as well. It's exciting times for me. It's one of the things that Greg Crabtree, who we're going to talk about, I know who's coming to a DC event here pretty shortly, he does that very well, where he's got like 40 or 50 clients at his firm. He's taking the data that he's learning from his clients and allowing folks like me, who I'm not a client, to get value out of what he's up to as well. So I like that playbook.
Yeah, Greg Crabtree is coming to speak to DC Black members on May 28th on the show. And then now he's going to come talk to our members, and certainly been a guy that we've talked a lot about his books recently and his frameworks.
Just a little background, Greg Crabtree is the author of Simple Numbers and Simple Numbers 2.0. And these are books not to be slept on. They're some of my favorite business books I've read in the past few years. And part of what he's doing is trying to pull out this common language of truth around businesses, which is numbers. And importantly, he is very opinionated about numbers, and he develops his own that can be empowering for founders to make strategic decisions and to increase the asset value of their companies. So right here at the top, I just want to jump into how we can use one of these Greg Crabtree numbers to help build stronger businesses. Ian, one of my favorite moments in business is when you have a piece of software, a service, a community, whatever, and you're at that living wage. Typically, this can happen in $100,000, $250,000 of revenue, somewhere in that range, where you're looking at this potential and you're asking yourself, how can I get to $1 million? And so I have a playbook that I want to spit out that we were talking about with a bunch of entrepreneurs in the past few weeks. And it's simply this. If you have momentum and you want to get to $1 million, here's the playbook. You use labor efficiency ratio, which is a Greg Crabtreeism. And labor efficiency ratio is simply this. You take your gross profit and your sales, and that is the new top line. So you take your gross profit and you divide it by the direct labor required to deliver that value. The value the client's paying for, you divide it by the direct labor you're using to deliver. That's going to be your delivery team. Typically, in the types of business, in digital business, it's going to be your delivery team. You aim for a benchmark of 2.0. So if your gross profit's $50, you want to spend $25 on your delivery team. That's the benchmark. Okay, that's the first step, is you get your LER to 2.0. And with a caveat that that delivery team is delivering to the standard that you've set expectations with your clients.
Right.
That's the hard part, right? Because a lot of founders are going to want to put their hands down in the delivery cookie jar.
Yep.
Because they are typically experts at what they do. And so they have trust issues when it comes to getting a delivery team in place that's taking care of business. We'll get to that. Okay, so LER at 2.0. And again, this is brainstorming. You can have 3.0, you can have 4.0, you can have 1.5, depending on where you're at in the business. The next step to $1 million. Less than 5 hours a week of management time of said delivery team. And the third step, focused. The founder, that's you, spends the majority of their time figuring out sales and marketing or growth in general. That's basically my simple 3-step recipe from going from $250,000 to $1 million, especially with a services business. Now, why is this hard? Because that sounds simple. Part of what these numbers help us to do, like LER, is to contend with, to frame up the more difficult challenge that we might not be looking at because it's vague. Because with the lack of numbers, with the lack of a plan, with the lack of strategy, we haven't framed up this enormous challenge we face. So instead, we focus on urgent and important things, but somewhat less important than growth if you're trying to get to 1 million, like my client's pissed off. My team member is unhappy. Everybody's unhappy. I'm unhappy. So when I'm speaking with founders at the 250 revenue mark, it's a lot of, I don't trust my team. I'm spending a bunch of time in product. I'm spending a bunch of time in delivery. Part of what I'm trying to do is say, your job is growth, yet 80% of what I'm hearing about is delivery.
Yeah.
And I think we got to flip it to be 80% growth and 20% delivery. That is the difference between a $1 million founder and a $250,000 founder.
Seems really simple when you say it, but I think the problem actually kicks off for most founders at the beginning of what you said, which is getting your LER or your delivery cost to 2.0 or greater, and then assuming that you are not a part of that delivery cost.
Yeah.
So that's the really hard part here, because all of us started off as the delivery cost. It was our area of expertise. It was like what we did. So we spun up this business because we were doing it as a job. Now we deliver it. Okay, now I'm going to start hiring other people. Now the next person that I hire, they're not as good as me. So they do 60% of the delivery, but I still have to do 40% of the delivery. Or I can't afford to hire somebody that does 100% of the delivery because then they eat up all the profit. So this is often the case, and we can make excuses about not wanting to delegate to people or not trusting people. But I think a lot of the times it comes back, like you're saying, Dan, to the simple math equation, which is how do I get my LER to 2.0 or better? And if you're in the delivery cost of your product, you have to account for that amount of money.
I think there's two important implications of the concept LER. The first is we talked about this progression of problems to solve. At the beginning, you got to figure out how to start a business and how to sell something. That's a hard problem to solve. You got to find some kind of product market fit. Then the next hard problem to solve is you got to recruit somebody that you trust to do the work that's valuable in the company. And that's pretty hard. And that's where we're hanging out right here in this discussion at the $250,000 revenue mark. It's like, well, I don't really trust this person, or I can't afford the person who I think's good, or I don't have a recruiting process, or I hate managing people. Yeah, hating managing people is a problem to solve. You need to solve it because you need to manage people to get to 1 million in, I would say, 9 out of 10 cases. But here's the thing, all your work's still ahead of you. Because figuring out how to sell $1 million worth of product a year is the next hard problem that you have to solve. It is also more expensive to solve, which means you definitely can't afford the person that does that. Right? Like, this is just the rule. There might be an exception to this, but as a rule, figuring out how to deliver something that someone clearly paid for, that's a simpler problem than figuring out the next 25 people that are going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so that's how this progression goes. If you think your problem is hiring and managing people and you're at 250, you're wrong. The problem is actually ahead of you. And that's what LER helps to do, is it helps you to frame up this thing that is vague, which is like, my problem isn't that I have a mental block against hiring people. For me, what the number helps you to do is separate yourself from it a little bit and look at it as a puzzle versus maybe a bundle of negative emotions around managing people. Could be another example. You mentioned earlier, Ian, that a lot of founders see team members as simply cost. But what LER encourages us to do is to look at our labor investments as ROIC. I'm investing $25 to get 50 back. And that's what a good hire does. And that's why, in simple numbers, the concept of having job posts open is the equivalent to missing out on Bitcoin in 2016, but at a smaller level. Or it could be a bigger level depending on what business you have. This concept of your labor costs are probably your biggest costs.
Yeah, in a services company.
Yeah, in a services company. So to review, my 3-step playbook is very simple, maybe not easy. Get your LER to 2.0. Get your management time of your delivery team down to less than 5 hours a week, and then focus on growth. Now, we pulled a little trick because this is not just a theory. We've actually applied this to our business remote first recruiting. One of the reasons it was easy for us to follow the 3-step playbook is that you and I have no idea how to recruit high quality team members. Thank you for laughing. Thank you. I think this is very interesting for founders to reflect upon because there is an enormous craftsperson mindset that affects a lot of founders who have an early momentum with their services business as they attempt to scale to 1 million. If they know too much about the delivery, they tinker in the delivery.
Yeah.
They mess with it. They get their hands involved because they know too much. But the simple playbook is designed to pose this new challenge in front of you. You are an entrepreneur. And the next level of the game is unlocking the sales and marketing level. And that's what you need to be doing to get to $1 million. And by the way, for different services, I've seen this happen at $1 million to $2 million. We just talked to a service business, for example, that their contract value is enormous. And you could very much be in the delivery at 2 million, just depending on what your annual order value is. I'm just using 250 to 1 million because it's sort of a common pattern I see for like digital marketing services and stuff like that. When we looked at growing remote first recruiting, it became easy for us to focus on growth, sales and marketing. And those are the challenges that we talk about in that business because the delivery is at 2 LER and we only hire people who can cut the cheddar. And we've had recruiters who did not cut the cheddar and we do not talk to them about cheese anymore. They are not around. And that's the bottom line. And part of managing people is giving them clear goals and bringing them into the vision. That's like 50% of management. But the thing that people don't talk about is getting the right people there and keeping the right people there. That's the other part of it, which is to say that the vast majority of people that call themselves a recruiter can't be a recruiter for us at LER2 with our business model, with our client set. And so finding those people is how you get to less than 5 hours of management time a week.
I think too, what you're pointing out is interesting, which is the vast majority of founders start in the delivery for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start in sales and marketing. And it's interesting when you find a founder that started in sales and marketing, they can basically sell anything. And so the delivery becomes much less important because they'll just move on to the next thing that has decent fundamentals so they can sell it and the economics make sense. I just don't think it's the case that most founders are sales and marketing first and then product second or delivery second. Most of the time it's the other way around. So this is kind of a battle and a hill that you have to climb up as a founder is you have to get yourself in a position where you're doing sales and marketing and you're good at it. And then you can get yourself out of the delivery and then you can figure out how the unit economics make sense.
Well, it's an interesting point, and it brings up another challenge to being an expert deliverer or craftsperson in your field, which is what's a better genesis question for a business? What can I do or what can I sell? And the answer is the latter. And the reason is because, like you said, then you can sell things that have better profiles in terms of business models.
Yeah.
And even on the delivery side, having a lot more flexibility about what you're willing to deliver. In other words, if you know a lot about delivery, you're likely to want to sell what you can do versus selling what's profitable, what's trending, what your clients want. You know what I mean? The next thing, whatever those things are, those are typically going to be more valuable than what you know how to do right now.
Yeah, I had 2 conversations this week, Dan, that are top of mind here. One is a founder that is very good at sales and marketing, and he is out of the delivery of the product of his company. And I think he's going to do extremely well. He needs to put together a roadmap in terms of how he's going to scale the organization and look a little bit deeper into these numbers. But I have no fear for that founder because of what we just talked about, which is put any product underneath him and he's going to sell it to over $1 million. The other conversation I had was with a founder that is also really good at sales and marketing, as he found himself coming up with products to deliver to the audience that aren't very profitable. So spun up a product because he has the audience, and then now he's having problems delivering that product because of the economics of it again. So he's trying to figure out like, hey, should I pull back on this? It's not exactly working, but he does have the audience. And so, like you said, I think it's much more exciting as a founder to have that problem, which is basically like, I have enough audience. I just don't have the right product.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the coaching certification Scaling Up uses LER. So they were the ones that really put this out into the world in collaboration with Greg. And it's very empowering seeing this investment in team as something that is a genuine return investment, like you would invest in a rental property or something. You can get into that mindset where if you know you're putting in 25, you're getting out 50. And it is a very interesting framework to think about your biggest expense, which is labor. There was a practitioner who wrote about it, and I didn't end up writing down his name, and now I can't find it. But he's associated with Scaling Up. And he says, in my experience as a business coach, leaders who have solved their cash flow problems are the same who have solved their people problems 100% of the time. Now, this coach is saying that, and I think that's a fascinating statement. I'm trying to figure out if I agree with that. But it's certainly the tree we're barking up right now, which is to say, do you have a problem where you don't like to manage, or do you just not have the margin? Because margin solves a lot of these problems. And when I think about our recruiting team, the management of it is sort of the last thing we think about. Like, yes, we have to do annual reviews and we do meet with them and we do track all the KPIs, but most of our time is spent with them talking about strategy and tactics. There's not a lot of like management to the thing. And part of that is because we got our cash flow game right. We got our business model game right. And we know our numbers.
Yeah. And that allows you, like you said in that example, to hire professionals at appropriate salaries. And then you don't have to worry about a bunch of the people problems. It's not to say they don't come up from time to time, but if you can compensate people fairly or even good for what they do, a lot of times I think you're right. The people problems do get solved with the margins.
Let's run with this idea, and let me introduce another idea that I think we'll find is related. Because you as a founder who's a craftsperson or a deliverer of the work, an expert, might be obscuring the general business model that you're executing. How would you do that? By essentially being too good. So your model might be broken. And here's how this works out on the P&L. I'm just going to say this thing. Owner compensation is not profit. Owner compensation is not profit. I'm going to say it one more time because nobody seems to understand this, myself included for a very long time. Owner compensation is not profit. So this is directly from Greg Crabtree. Quote, a salary is for what you do. A return is on what you own. So you have to ask yourself, how much are you doing for your business? And then how much is your business returning for your investment? Those are two separate questions. So how can this go wrong? According to Greg Crabtree, and I'll just say it again, his episode that we did with him this year is one of our most popular. His two books, Simple Numbers and Simple Numbers 2.0, are so much more engaging than the titles would suggest. They are thrilling. He writes that there are 8 functions in any business. There's a CEO or executive function, sales, marketing, operations, finance, technology, HR, and customer advocacy. And he writes, if you have a business that does less than $1 million in revenue, you might find yourself doing all 8. But everybody listening to this podcast right now can put percentages into each of the 8 categories. And then here's the fun part, pay yourself a market rate. And if you're not willing to do it on your tax return, do it in theory on your cash flow forecast and ask yourself, can you turn a profit after you've properly compensated the person in your role? And if the answer is no, which it is for so many of us, you have not built a profitable asset, a contraption, a mousetrap, a money return system that works without a super founder. A super founder is an expert who focuses on delivery, is surrounded by contractors and people who aren't taking responsibility for delivery, and they're paying themselves a salary. It's a job with assistants. And we've all seen those businesses come across our desks when M&A comes up. And those are the businesses that are nearly impossible to sell.
Yeah, they get passed on.
Yeah.
So when you add up the salaries there, a lot of times it starts to look really ugly. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in payroll. And you can say, yeah, I'm going to go to the Philippines and hire this person for $2,000. You have to ask yourself the question, are they able to deliver at the same level that you're able to deliver at? Of course, you can find somebody cheaper. What does the delivery look like? So you add up all those numbers at the end of the day, and you figure out it's $300,000. And then you add that back into the business and you realize you are net negative 10, 20, 30%.
It could be the case, in other words, that your business only works if you run it, because to replace yourself would cost more than you net in a year. And that's where these concepts start to free us up a little bit. It's like, well, I have to sell something different. I have to raise my price. I have to lower my costs. I have to change my value proposition. I have to tweak the offer to go in a different direction, to build something where you can pay yourself or somebody else to sit in that CEO chair and run a business that can reliably return 15% on your capital every year. Why is this important? Because we can all just go get jobs. And there's a lot of ways to make money, right? Like, and this is an interesting standard to hold ourselves to, because you're going to need the profit to invest in a team to scale this thing. And I think for a lot of us, we think, well, there's this magic moment when it breaks right somehow and this thing gets profitable. I get a big client or I have a good year. How many times have you heard, I'm all staffed up for the next X dollars of revenue, I'm good to go? And typically we're making those judgments by putting our thumb in the soup of the P&L and having a feel for it. The LER in this process forces us to go to the next level, is like, are we actually getting a return on the labor we're investing in? And importantly, are we getting a return on our labor? And I think that's an interesting standard that as founders, we typically won't hold ourselves to. And the way you can do that is by looking at your market comps. Not only what you could earn working for another company or starting another sort of business, but what you could pay somebody else to do in your position. How might you change the time allocation if you were managing yourself, in other words, or if you were managing another person running the company? How would you break down their time between CEO, sales, marketing, operations, finance, tech, HR, and customer advocacy? Does that ideal match up with how you are allocating your time? So this forces us to not only have clear roles and an LER for each person that works on our team, but for ourselves as the CEO. We're grinding on this because, the theme of DC Mexico, for me, ambition, number one. We're looking to grow. Number two, it's hard. That's because what we're talking about are challenging things. Figuring out how to grow your business to $1 or $2 million is a lot harder than figuring out how to deliver for your first 6 clients. And so we're talking about getting more ambitious, getting more disciplined, moving on. And it all boils down to the people that you get involved in your company. And so how do you figure out how to do people? Well, part of it is accepting the fact that, guess what? Nobody's a good manager when you start. And that's something that you have to learn. And that sucks. You hear all the excuses. I'm anxious about it. I'm introverted, whatever. Yeah, I am too. But I realize that to grow a multi-million-dollar business, you have to manage people. That's part of the hard things. Guess what else is hard? Just about everything else.
Yeah.
And that's why not a lot of people have multi-million-dollar businesses. So, rah, we can do it. A lot of other people that are more introverted than us have done it. Let's do this thing, because guess what? The next thing's harder. How do we figure out how to do it? By the numbers. That was the final theme of DC Mexico for me, is this financial planning and analysis. Every question ultimately in our businesses boils down to the people involved. But how do we think about the people involved? We can find a source of truth by thinking about it through the numbers. And that's where FP&A comes in. And that's why I think that was a really big, important theme down in Mexico. How do I know I have the right people? Well, we're looking to a source of truth, which is the numbers. What are they producing based on their work?
From stage, Dan, I asked people who had this FP&A function. And again, I'm going to keep using acronyms to keep it confusing. So maybe you'll hire me to figure this out for you.
Well, you really are.
But I asked people in that room how many people had this FP&A function, and very few of them did. And I think one of the things I want to make clear here is financial planning and analysis is not bookkeeping, and it's not your CPA. Bookkeeping is just simply knowing how much money is coming in and going out every month. Okay. And categorizing it so you have a picture of what's going on in the different divisions and your costs and whatnot. You can't have an LER without understanding your bookkeeping. Okay. So you got to do that. Your CPA, God bless them, There's some really amazing ones out there, but most of them file your taxes. That's what they do. They file your taxes and they check in on your bookkeeper. Okay. It's rare to find one that does FP&A function. Okay. This is CFO territory. This is somebody else besides your CPA and your bookkeeper. You and I went and we hired for this last year. And I want to give people an idea of what it costs because I was really surprised how inexpensive it can be. And part of the reason it can be inexpensive is most companies sub $10 million don't need this as a primary function in their organization. They need someone to come in for a couple hours a week or a month to do the analysis on the business. So you can find these people for $1,000 to $2,000 a month. A lot of them are retired CPAs or ex-CFOs or somebody that's looking to do some fractional work. They will come into your business and help you to understand things like LER. And that is amazing that you can find these people for that little.
Yeah, and it's a part-time thing is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like you can do this on a quarterly basis if you want. We do it on a monthly basis. If you have clean books and clean tax returns, you can get someone to go in there and do the ninja work for 10 to 20 hours. They can get you your first monthly business review going. And then once you get the basic systems up and running and you feel empowered, you can space it out. It's affordable is the main thing, and it's invaluable. The ROI on this is enormous because a good finance person is going to prod the shit out of you. I mean, just in the past few weeks, this person has saved us $17,000.
Yeah.
By having a bee in their bonnet about a point on our P&L that we didn't even really see because there's a million things to focus on right now. There was $17,000 just sitting there for the taking. So you can ROI this stuff very quickly. And that's not even to mention the forward-looking stuff, the pricing stuff, the strategy stuff.
Yeah, most of us aren't good at this by nature. This is not the reason why we started a business. And so looking into these numbers, I can think of a couple different examples of things that have happened over the last couple months, Dan. One function that this person helped us out with was figuring out comp structure. So a comp structure that's going to scale over the next year and a half that makes sense with the company and with the business unit that we're running. The other thing that they figured out a few days ago, I was curious how our job site's doing. I wanted to know how many cents of each dollar we brought in we were keeping. That was a 2-hour exercise that they were able to provide us. That's insight now that I have into that organization.
We got a per centavo breakdown. It was
Correct.
Awesome. This is how much your server costs are. It's 2 cents on the dollar is servers. 5 cents on the dollar is this. And now you're empowered because you can make the case for increasing, decreasing, reallocating, stuff like that.
The other thing that happened, and this happens every month, is they send over an async Loom video walking us through the business, the different units, and the total financial picture of the company. This is an async video, so you and I watch it as we want. And then over the next couple of days, I usually take a day or two to digest it, and then I'll come back with 6 more questions. A lot of times that leads to more analysis or things that we need to change in the business for the next month. One of the things that's really important about that analysis, and this is something that everybody should strive to do in their business. I was just talking to somebody today about this. You got to close your books within 4 to 7 days after the month ends. So we get this report a few days after the month ends. And the reason that's really important is because a lot of these businesses, especially sub a couple $1 million, are making decisions on a monthly basis. You cannot make good monthly decisions if you're lagging, meaning if you're getting your financials back a month or 2 late, it's already too late to make the decisions you should have made 3 months ago. So first things first, close your books early.
Hopefully you'll go out and recruit this person because I think it's a game changer. And I talked about it last week on the show. It's one of these things exercise, eat less, that's so obvious it just doesn't get talked about enough. So I'm glad we're talking about it today. Just this is how best-in-class businesses operate. And we can be that right now and affordably and make our money back in the first 6 months. So let's go do this. Let's go figure it out. This finance person should be kicking your butt. Money's great, but one of the problems with money is that it solves too many problems. It's too flexible, right? Money, it's like super glue. It just flows into all the problems and hangs out there and leaves and comes back. And a great finance person is going to start to add some structure around that money and start to look at it as blocks, because the blocks on your P&L they can be completely useless to you. What the finance professional is trying to create stories out of those blocks of money. This 40% of this person's time, 20% of this person's time, and these expenses are actually your investment in this revenue. That's a judgment. And this is your money going into that to do that. And they're showing it back to you and saying, that doesn't make sense. First off, you're relative to the industry, your profitability is low, or you're not at an LER 2.0. Why did you make that decision? And really, really pushing back where money can just flow out and asking yourself, is this dollar going to work for you? It's one of the things that I've heard a lot of dividend investors and cash flow investors talk about is this dollar is like a little foot soldier. It's going out there to go to work for me. And I think a great fractional finance person in your business can do the same for every single dollar that's going out in your business. Is that a soldier going to work on behalf of you and on behalf of your clients? I always think of the finance people when I used to work in a big office, running around to everybody's desk and sort of asking them where they went to dinner last night. But the even better part is when they're asking about those invested dollars. Is so-and-so going to get a raise? Is so-and-so working on the right projects? Is so-and-so making a difference in a profitable manner? Or do they need to be put 20% of their time onto this project where they can create ROIC? And by the way, is that project a good idea, or do you have any credible reason for thinking that it's going to return on capital? And how fast can you demonstrate that? Because if you can't demonstrate it in 60 days, then you're just losing money. So why are we going that route? And so you can really take a lot of the wish thinking out of this. And I think that's the turn that a lot of us are making as we're going from $250,000 to $1 million to $2 million and beyond. It's the wish thinking, it's the hope, it's the excitement that got us here. But we can often squander the opportunity by continuing those habits as we grow a scaled organization.
We did a really fun exercise in Mexico. It was called Pull Out Your Shiny Object. And you sat with a little group. Yeah.
Watch it there, buddy.
Don't take it literally, all right? You sat with a little group and you got to discuss with them whether or not it would be a good idea. And for me, this is my little shiny object. So I have to be careful when I talk about this because I get very excited about the prospect of finding a CFO, a part-time CFO, and a bookkeeper for people for a couple grand a month. Because we've done it, seen it happen multiple times. I know where to find them. I got a recruiting company. I really got to control myself here.
So if you're listening to this episode and you love finance, you can get people that have worked at reputable firms in South America for, call it $10 to $15 an hour. And now you're charging your clients $25,000 a year for financial coaching. This is a no-brainer service. There's a handful of DCers that actually do this business. It's just depending on how you position it and what type of clients and what the deliverable is and expectations. Absolutely. The need for this is enormous. To summarize, if you're trying to get to $1 million, typically we're talking about people problems. We're talking about sales and marketing problems. We are recommending getting your numbers down. It can give you some separation. The final thing I really noticed when I was hanging out with founders at the early stages is how much they personally identified with all of the challenges in the business and took it as a commentary on their abilities and their self. And it's a sort of a long way of saying we take things personally. I'm not a good manager. I'm not good at this. Well, guess what? We're not all good at this. If we're good at something, we'd have a high-paying job somewhere, right? We're entrepreneurs. We're out here. We're trying to build something. It means a lot of the time you're going to be doing things that you're not good at. And although I sympathize with identifying when your business gets bad, you feel bad. It's worth taking a look at the numbers because they help to make that separation a little bit and say, let's look at this thing independent of what I'm good at. Because what I'm just doing is building this thing and I want it to be good. It's not about how good or bad I am. It's about what that thing is. And that's where these numbers can help us to see into these more complicated people problems. And when we start with the people problems, it's easy to get stuck there. And so we're starting with the numbers. Let's take a look at the business model. Let's take a look at our LER. Let's take a look at owner compensation and how much the founders are dedicating to each functional area of the business and how much of a return we are getting on it. So how about this? We don't care how good you are at managing people. All we care about is the LER. We don't care how good you are at sales. All we care about is the ROI. So let's take a look at those things and judge it objectively. There you go. That's a little wrap up. Ian, let's touch base on DC Mexico real quick before we turn off the mics. You didn't yet have an opportunity. Last week, I talked a little bit about DC Mexico. So I'm going to give you some overview stats. The numbers are in, the photos in. We'll post some at this blog post. We had 201 total attendees, 35 of which were DC Black members. We had 8 of our team members, our internal team, 8 team members there, and 9 volunteers. One thing that's interesting that jumped out about the stats is that there were 60 official meetups. So 200 people meeting in 60 meetups outside of the event function. So the meetups were on everything and anything that you can imagine, complete and utter business nerdery. One of my favorite quotes about the weekend, I wrote it down here, was, it was insane to meet so many people wired the same way as me. What does that mean? It's like, do you want to talk about LER? Yes. Do you want to talk about your new obsession with health and fitness or whatever? Yes. Do you want to talk about your crypto portfolio? Yes. Do you want to talk about that new business you want to start? Yes. I want to talk about it. And it's just like complete and utter business nerdery by the beach for a week.
Yeah. And generally speaking, these meetups happen before and after the event. They're member led. And oftentimes, like you said, yeah, it's like a crypto meeting, 3 p.m. in the pool. We'll be ordering margaritas. See you there. Make sure to bring a plastic glass.
We'll be ordering margaritas and buying coins. So let's do that. Speaking of pre-event activities, 50% of the attendees talked to an attendee before the actual conference. We actually host calls in advance. So it's this whole big thing where what we're trying to create is this immersive experience where you go down there with friends, with family for a week at a time. And yeah, I think we've achieved that in our first year down there. And we're just looking for more of that. I think it's a hard thing to find in adult life where you get to go and chill with your friends like that. You know what I mean? Like long form hangouts.
One of my dreams is finally being realized, which is there was a lot of kids and nannies and mother-in-laws and husbands and wives watching kids play around in the pool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Which was really special because it's kind of cool. The way that the Hyatt's laid out there in Playa, you stand at the top and it all flows down to the ocean and the rooms are on the side. But at the bottom is basically 2 restaurants, a club, and unlimited amount of pool space.
Yeah.
And so it was a really special environment where all the families and kids and whatnot and all the conference attendees at different times of the day were hanging out in the pool.
Yeah. It was like an adult pool. That was like where the crypto meetup was.
Exactly.
It was like a kids pool. It was a cool event.
We call that future investors pool. But yeah, it's not just kids pool. For those of you that are interested in joining us in Barcelona and Bangkok as DC Black members, that community is also open right now until the 7th of June, at which time it will slam shut. Masterminds will start, and that community will march forward. So I encourage you to book a call with somebody on our team if you're interested in joining that community. I just want to give a special shout out to all of the people that donated their time to be on that stage in Mexico. There were some extremely moving talks and there were some extremely informative talks. And this conference, we had more talks on stage than we'd ever had before. And we were a little bit worried about that. But I think in the end, it worked out. So it was a different venue than we'd done before down in Playa. We're definitely coming back there again. I think it worked out well. And it was a little bit of a different formula to the event, which I also think worked out. So special thank you to everybody that got up on stage there. Again, these are not preachers. They're practitioners. These are people that are in the day-to-day of their operation.
It takes a lot of work to peel out and to do those talks. Yeah, we write down all the time, connection and contribution. We just want to get as many people contributing as possible. Everyone's story is fascinating and you can learn from it. That's one of the themes of the event too, whether you run one of the darling tech companies or whether you've crossed that $250,000 barrier. Or I went to a meetup where everyone had about $250,000 in revenue. It's one of the highlights of the event for me because the challenges that they were struggling with were very real to me. Like I understood, I saw it fascinating, and I also saw the potential in what they're doing. The insight that their products and services had were inspiring to me. And sometimes they have fresh tooling too. So it's interesting to see businesses that just got started. They might have newer marketing techniques, newer ways of running the operation that more established businesses can learn from. So I like that everyone's here. We're all together. We're learning from each other and contributing. So that's why we had so many people up on stage. It was cool.
Yep, and more attendees than ever pre-bought for next year. So definitely going back to play. I look forward to seeing everybody there again 12 months from now.
All right. Good stuff, Ian. That's it for this week. We'll see you next Thursday.
See you then.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tropical MBA podcast. You can go to tropicalmba.com, get access to hundreds of back episodes and all kinds of other goodies. Load up your iPod. That is the cheapest way to fly business class on your next international flight. We will see you next Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, buddy.